was where I would have to say one of the most important artists to influence the new republic would be born. I introduce to you Osman Hamdi Bey. Osman Hamdi was the son of Ibrahim Ethem Pasha, a former Grand Vizier who was a Greek boy from the island of Chios, orphaned at a very young age following the 1821 Greek uprising. Please recall what I mentioned earlier about devşirme and the process of training and indoctrination. Osman Hamdi Bey was born in 1842. He died at the age of 68 in 1910, still with over 10 years to go to the forming of the Republic of Turkey. He was sort of a prototypical Renaissance man, an Ottoman statesman, intellectual, art expert, and also a prominent and pioneering Turkish painter. He was also an accomplished archaeologist and is considered as the pioneer of the museum curator's profession in Turkey. He was the founder of the Istanbul Archaeological Museum and of the Istanbul Academy of Fine Arts, or the Sanayi Nefise Mektebi, known today as the Mimar Sinan University. Moving on to the art itself and clearing up the misconception that the art in the Western sense is a new thing for Turkey, here are some examples of prototypical Orientalist works by Osman Hamdi Bey. It's, unfortunately, the aspect ratio on my thing is a little weird, so bear with it. He created many works very much so in the style of Jerome, his most influential teacher. Yet where he excelled was his wit, his irony, and his veiled use of art's true power, the ability to criticize, but only in the sense if you're up to being able to read what was written. To this day, this is something of a very weird state in Turkey, where there are still active laws in place that some have likened to thought crime. A written critique can get the author into a lot of trouble. Yet where the image, if not dealt with heavy-handedly, allows one to discuss topics or deal with issues otherwise very taboo. This is another example of a very prototypical Orientalist work. Yet the following two that I'm going to show you now are what I refer to as the gold mine. The Turtle Trainer is probably his best known work. Why it's his best known work is that it went up onto auction in late 2003, early 2004. Forgive me for not having the date right. It was bid up to 5 million new Turkish liras, which approximately equals around $2.5 million, so thereabouts. It was bid up to auction by two new emerging museums. Up till then, there had never been this kind of a price structure. What's interesting about this particular piece is that it's sarcastic in its own way. It's critiquing the empire. It's also been argued that the figure is an autoportrait of Osman Hamdi. And you see that there are the turtles. And yes, they did actually place candles on top of the turtles as these kind of mobile garden lighting fixtures. The irony is the fact that you cannot really train a turtle. And it's actually it's a self-referential thing in which he's actually talking about how he feels somewhat confined in his role as a teacher and as a curator and as someone who's guiding. Oh, we have one of these, perfect. You didn't break it, did you? All right, here we go. But in my opinion, his most important work, the beginning of it all for a Turkish contemporary, is a work that's called, he calls it the Mihrap. You may at first be lured into thinking that this, again, is an ordinary Orientalist painting. going to point out some facts. What she's sitting on, right there, is what you would put the Quran, or the holiest book of Islam. It's our version of the Bible, the Torah. At her feet are religious texts. Ambiguous, you don't really know. Behind her is the mihrab. This is what points the way towards Mecca. Now, there's a slight hint of pregnancy. So what is he saying? Please remember that this, 1901, he's saying, here is God. I think that's pretty heavy. The irony is also you cannot show this work to this day in public, in Turkey, or in any Muslim country. I would be very surprised if there wouldn't be massive revolt and revolution in the streets if this was hung in the Louvre. So this is the beginning of it all. With Osman Hamdi, I closed the curtain on the empire. Whoop, sorry, going back. Cliches and stereotypes are a commonplace in the act of orienting ourselves to our environment. We're all led down strange paths, embellished with imagery. And the origins of these associations or imprints are often forgotten or unexamined. When we take a mental tour of a significant destination, such as a great city, we have recourse to landmarks, the Eiffel Tower, the Empire State Building, London Bridge, or the Hagia Sophia. All act as cultural landmarks, which are the starting points for our projected journeys. In the case of Turkey, the images formed in the minds of those from other places are less distinct, less current, less accurate, and carry a weight of association that have even less to do with the reality of the place than with the caricatures and generalizations embodied in the examples I mentioned previously. I hope that the selection of artists and images will demonstrate how varied and multifaceted the new landscape is, beyond the accretion of assumptions and preconceived notions that today serve as the basis of cultural dialogue. Whether we are confronting the vestiges of an empire and trying to come to grips with it in a modern city, or moving through the human interior in a contemporary battleground. These works I'm showing you are all pretty much earlier works. This is the borrowed thematics. These are the works that are direct transplants of Western notions of art, reinterpreted in kind of semi-Turkish content. This lady happens to be my great-great-aunt. She's one of the first Turkish female painters. She graduated from the Berlin Academy in 1936. Her diploma is kind of disturbing. It has a swastika on it. Yes. Now, this is not my attempt to show you the worst pie chart ever in the history of the Art Taipei Forum, but I think it might be beneficial to take a quick look at it, just for a recap sense. From a genetic perspective, over 40% of the population of Turkey can be placed in a DNA grouping that is European. That's roughly 30 million people. When thinking of today's Turkey, we must remember that this is essentially the condensed, stripped down vestiges of the once massive Ottoman Empire. The first quarter of the 20th century changed everything. In order to bring cohesion to a completely demolished structure, a nation was formed. The word Turk also has a wider meaning in a historical context, because it has been used to refer to all Muslim inhabitants of the Ottoman Empire, irrespective of their ethnicity. So here we are, a nation that used an ethnic identifier, like Turk, to describe the remains, and so went on to confuse the rest of the world. Without belaboring this point, this is an issue that creates a point of conflict or discontent, especially inside of Turkey, and subsequently gets dealt through with art. Sorry, my iPad is sending me messages. Let me briefly talk to you about the birth of the modern Turkish nation without going into detail not relevant to our subject, and take a look at one of history's unique political figures. He's a product of the Ottoman Empire and the figure whose own ethnic identity has been the topic of many debate. Atatürk, one of the greatest reformers the 20th century ever saw. In the newly established republic, he not only changed the alphabet, I'm going to underline that point, he changed the alphabet and reformed dress codes. Among a host of other reforms, one of his most important agendas was to transform the culture, and he firmly believed that the future of this new nation was grounded in arts and culture. To quote Atatürk, "Culture is the foundation of the Turkish Republic." He described modern Turkey's ideological thrust as a creation of patriotism blended with lofty humanist ideal. He included both his own nation's creative legacy and what he saw as the admirable values of global civilization. Now, what we have here is a massive transplantation from the West of the highest order. Everything you can think of was reset. Literature, architecture, music, design. What can be seen on one hand as positive cultural reformism, on the other hand, can be seen as a cultural massacre. In this massive shift and restructuring, the most dramatic step this young republic took was the language reform of 1928, when virtually overnight a variant Arabic script and alphabet that had been in place for over 500 years was replaced with a new Latin one. This is 1928. With this changeover result in a huge leap in literacy. Consider that before the language reformation, the literacy rate was under 20%. And today, with this new alphabet, it is over 90%. But at the same time, a legacy of 600 plus years was completely cast aside. A huge repository of arts and sciences was abandoned, discarded and left to specialists to pick up and choose which would make it into the new republic in the new alphabet. I'm sure I'm not the only one who can see the specter of the censorist lurking in the wings. Following in Osman Hamdi's wake came serious groups of Western-influenced, mainly Impressionist emulators during the early part of the 20th century. From the standpoint of contemporary Turkish art, I regard this time as a kind of lengthy pregnancy. It's not until the early 1960s that Turkish art truly becomes Turkish. When works are created that are truly unique and not just facsimiles. As much as the 60s was a time of change, of revolution, of new discovery for the Western world, so it was for Turkey. A young, hungry generation of creatives, not just looking to the West, but also looking at their domestic body of work, literature, theater, music. There was a battle being waged between figurative on one side and really, in the figurative sense, it was the extension of the body, the search for what was Turkish, what was this new animal, what was this new republic. And on the other, the non-figurative, what was part of the history, the legacy, a sort of neo-Ottoman art, a traditionalist, almost decorative side that didn't offend Islamic sensibilities. This is still to this day a very serious issue that is still a serious battleground, albeit undeclared, to the rest of the world. Just this last March, the General Secretary to the Turkish President, who is an extension of the in-power Conservative Party, the AKP, said, "Just as the Conservative Party had a conservative definition in understanding of democracy, that they also had a responsibility to help develop a conservative aesthetic and hence conservative art. This should be an interesting phenomenon to follow and see what excitement comes from it. I am personally curious to see what conservative art looks like. In the current market sense, the major breaking point didn't happen until the turn of the turn of the millennium. The necessary support structure was not in place for the artists who were present. No real galleries, no real museums, no government subsidies, no real collectors. A scene where the artists were creating works under very difficult conditions, with few to share their works with. Imagine that we were a country sitting on massive gold deposits without the technology to mine, refine, or to distribute. The issue was not that there weren't any galleries. It is rather that the galleries themselves were run by amateurs or art lovers who were satisfied with minimal region-specific sales. The artists were pushing, pulling, doing great self-challenging works, yet getting no support. This is still pretty much the case, especially domestic support. The percentage of artists at that time that were able to provide for their families, pay their bills through the money that they earned from the sales of their art was next to zero. How do I know? That's the world I was born into. That was our reality. Almost every serious artist had a second job, generally teaching. The situation started undergoing dramatic change due to a combination of elements: relative political and economic stability and the growing international presence of Turkish arts and culture. Also, these individual accomplishments following the global rise of interest in the art world was supported in Turkey by the attention that was being focused on the Istanbul Biennale. Established in 1987, it is now considered one of the most prestigious biennales alongside Venice, Sao Paulo, and Sydney. Along with the biennales, which are great for drawing awareness to a region, but maybe not necessarily to the art of the host country, it has been said that the place to take the pulse is at the art fair. After many aborted malfunctioning small local fairs, a group of individuals got together with the mission to give Turkey the art fair they felt it deserved. It started off with a bang with Deutsche Bank as its main sponsor. Sadly, the fiscal policy of this institution caused a pause, and later the sponsorship was taken up by Akbank, another private banking institution, and later turned into primarily a self-subsidized event. So from modest starts in 2006, with official numbers being 30,000 visitors, those are declared official numbers. I would say the real numbers were more like 20,000, has gone up to around, in real numbers, around 45,000 attendees. But the fair itself is fairly lacking in character. It is a strong domestic fair with a smattering of international galleries sans content. It has played the role of a vital introductory space for international collectors to see the new kids on the block. Yet, like all things, this also presents some problems. We'll come to that in the conclusion of the presentation. Currently, it appears that the vista of the scene is also about to go into a dramatic shift as a new fair is making the play to be on the scene.